won't it be a time? Oh, won't it be a time? Oh, won't it be a time? Oh, talking with the angels. Won't it be a time? If you know it, you can help me. Then one more time. I'll say, won't it be a time? Oh, won't it be a
Shalom, saints, and blessings to you all in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Welcome to this episode of Un-Apologetics, show where we are unapologetic about apologetics, and I am your host, CJ Cox. I want to go ahead and say shalom all around, of course, to anybody who is currently watching this live. If you are here, please remember to like and share this video, and consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so. Hit the bell to get notified every time that we go live. Remember to leave any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques, anything of that nature in the comment section down below. And of course, if you're watching this live, any comments or questions asked appropriately, of course, will be read or answered, depending on if they're a comment or question, here on stream if they're given in the form of super chats. So we just want to address that here real quick. A couple channel housekeeping things we want to get to while we're here. If you want to follow us on various social media platforms, you can do so. I am on Gab, Parler, Facebook, Minds, Twitter, or Twix, or X, or whatever you call it. I don't really care. Facebook, I might have already said that, but I'm saying it again. You can find us at the tag The Synagogue on any of those websites, and I certainly appreciate anybody who is following us there. Also, if you'd like to check out some of the stuff we have in the description, let me get this black screen off so you guys can see me. If you'd like to check out some of the stuff we have in the description, there is much to look at. For example, you will find links to my guest, the CA podcast, who we will introduce here in just a second. You can also find links to my other channels. I have a politics channel, which some of you might wonder why this isn't posted over there. It might end up being, to be honest with you, but we'll see. We're going to go ahead and post it here for now. At any rate, the Synagogue News link is below. We talk about politics from a traditionalist, conservative, more constitutional perspective, and of course, adding a Christian perspective on top of that. I also have a link to my music channel underneath if you guys are interested in hip-hop music. Guess what? I make hip-hop music. So link to that down below as well. I also have links to my book, 15 Questions for Calvinists Answered, if you guys would like to check that out. So far, have not gotten a negative review on that book. That's not true, actually. I have one from a gentleman who reviewed it on Rumble. Beyond that, though, most people, both Arminian and Calvinist, have quite appreciated the work. So that's pretty cool. And you can go ahead and check that out. Obviously, it contributes to what we're doing here as well, so I certainly appreciate that. Link to my paper on the DoD deception argument, why Dr. Tim Stratton's DoD argument fails. The first edition is on Academia. You can go ahead and check it out down there. The second edition will hopefully be published next year. That is the goal. But nevertheless, if you want to check out the first edition, link is down below. Appreciate anybody who is doing that. I'll also have a playlist with all of my debates down there, and we'll go ahead and end it there because that's all that I have in terms of links below. We don't have anything coming up in the near future, so nothing to recommend to you guys there. I do want to remind you guys of the Patreon. $5 monthly gets you access to our Tea Party tier where we post bi-weekly. It is exclusive to Breakfast Tea is exclusive to the Patreon, so you won't be able to find it anywhere else. Our last episode 2 weeks ago was on the Christ is King controversy and Christian anti-Semitism. So if you guys would like to hear some of my opinions on that, please do consider checking that out. Again, it is $5 monthly, or if you just like to buy the single episode, that is $7. I'd personally recommend just getting the whole thing because you get more content for less money. I mean, it's just makes sense. Our next episode coming up here very soon is going to be on the idea of whether or not the Bible teaches Jesus is God. So, certainly looking forward to posting that if any of you are interested. We have various other episodes on there talking about free grace, talking about Calvinism, so on and so forth. Obviously, it is extra content that is on top of what we're already posting here, right? But if you guys would like to contribute to what we do, it is a way to get something tangible for your contribution. Speaking of contributions, you can also give super chat, super sticker, super thanks. All of those will be read on stream and answered if you guys ask them. You could also give a one-time donation through PayPal or become a channel member if you fancy. Those are different ways that you can contribute to the work we do here as well. In terms of channel housekeeping, that's pretty much all we got. As you guys know, we'd like to start this off with a prayer. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to introduce my guest, and we are going to have a little fencing match today. Just kidding. Although fencing is actually significantly funner than I thought. I watched it last Olympics, and I'm a fan. I'm not going to lie to you. Anyways, let's go ahead and get our prayer on, and we'll get the show on the road. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you once again for the opportunity to make these videos. I just want to pray that we use this video for edification of your body and for glorification of your name, Lord, and just in an honest pursuit of truth. May we all be blessed here today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, ladies and germs and ladies, we have a guest today, Micheal, the Canadian Atheist from the CA podcast. Shalom, my friend. Thank you again for being here. And go ahead and introduce a little bit about yourself in case there are some new viewers in here today.
Well, you already said everything. CJ, it's so good to be back. For everybody watching this now and who will watch it later, just so you're aware, we banter so much. We started chatting 45-ish minutes ago, and then CJ was finally like, we should hit record. Yeah, well, we get on well. The capodcast.ca, that's where I do a little bitty podcast with a dear friend of mine, Dean. He's my saner half, and we've been doing it now for, I got notifications, a little over 8 years we've been doing that. And CJ has embarrassed us because he posts more regularly than we do. So he has more episodes than we do, even though we've been doing it for like 9 times longer than he has. How embarrassing. But seriously, we've been fortunate enough to have some wonderful guests. Your host today included. CJ's been on, I don't know, 3-4 times, and I've been here probably the same amount, if not more. When we were chatting about today, he's like, where do you want to do it, your place or mine? I'm like, I just released an episode. Let's do it on yours. And here we are. If you ever want to reach out and have a conversation, you can email the ca@rogers.com. I'll post it in the private chat here, and then CJ can pop it in the regular chat. If you want to have a talk, I don't bite a lot, but love having conversations with believers. I like talking to people that I disagree with. It's much more fun than being locked in an echo chamber all the time, which is, of course, why we're here. CJ, I got to say, I'm just going to take over your whole damn show. It's funny when you talked about hip hop. It was funny. So I was thinking back to when I listened to a lot more hip hop. I'm thinking like KRS-One, Public Enemy, Chuck D. I still love his voice. Got an amazing voice. Ice Cube, Ice-T, those guys. Who's now just more acting than anything else.
Right.
But yeah, I thought that was funny. I'm gonna have to look that up. I'll be curious to hear your rhyming. But so just again, so everybody else is aware, CJ and I have been talking about today for a little bit, kind of going back and forth about timing and topics and so on and so forth. So hopefully you find the conversation engaging. We always get on well. So it's going to, we seem to snatch agreement out of the jaws of disagreement a lot of times, more often than not. Funny about what you said a minute ago about a stream you got coming up on whether, Jesus is God and stuff like that. When I was a believer, I was a Trinitarian. I firmly believe that's the only stance that you can back up biblically. I've spoken to kind of like oneness Unitarians and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, but can you show that in the Bible? You don't have to get really much past Genesis before there's even the idea of kind of 3 right off the bat. So, but I do find that interesting. And then as far as free grace goes, yeah, when I was a Christian, I believe I was saved by grace through faith alone. And so that's what I came out of long time ago. But yeah, I watch CJ streams fairly regularly, and I enjoy the topics that he covers, even though for the most part, I think he's wrong.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things you'll notice, guys, in this conversation. Part of the thing that makes these conversations great is I've self-identified as a reform fundamentalist, obviously in politics, traditionalist and conservative. I think on the flip side, we would Micheal would identify, and correct me if I'm wrong here, as progressive politically, probably more modernist than traditionalist, and probably not probably, you have said you don't love the term agnostic, so just atheist.
Yep.
So that, it's as diametrically opposed as you can get. I guess in a sense, it's kind of a little bit of horseshoe theory, in the sense that there does end up being a lot of meeting in the middle, but maybe more than horseshoe theory. It's just a matter of not being an asshole. But you know what?
It's interesting that you said that, because and this is something else, and I typically say it at the end of our discussions, but this time I'll say it at the beginning. Pay close attention, because what you're going to steal CJ's words that I've used as well before. Two people that are diametrically opposed. Like, yes, I'm an atheist. I am convinced gods do not exist. I don't sit on the fence and go like, well, I don't know. No, I'm convinced CJ is wrong about that. But we will still not be either rude or demeaning or anything like that to each other, because we have built over time, it's a number of years now, a fundamental respect for each other, even though, like, in spite of the fact that we're so different in those ways. And yeah, I don't disagree with the labels that CJ put on me. I'm pretty damn far to the left. Democratic socialism, kind of politically, is how I vote. I vote very far left. In Canada, we have a 3-party system. So we have the Conservatives, which would be your GOP. We have the Liberals, which would be your Democrats. And then we have the NDP, or New Democratic Party. And the best way to describe that would be if Bernie Sanders, or now Mandami, was in Canada, they would be part of the NDP party. And that's typically who I vote for, quite far in the left. So.
Yeah, and so bear that in mind, guys, as we do this, because you can disagree and not be awful about it. You can even disagree vehemently and not be awful about it. In fact, fun fact, back in the United States Civil War, and of course we're not about to come to physical blows, but back in the United States Civil War, there were many stories of guys like Lou Armistead and Winfield Scott Hancock, for example, still maintaining affections for one another in the middle of the war. And I only bring that up to say, if you can be commanding armies against each other and still realize, hey, that dude's actually a pretty good dude, and when this is all over, I'd like to go and hang out with him again. Unfortunately, they never got to. Lou Armistead died in combat. Then how much more so those of us who are just sitting up here on YouTube debating issues? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I remember it might have been during our first stream, which I think was after our first quote unquote debate that we did, which I think was on Donnie's channel years back.
Mm-hmm.
And we were having a chat, and I said, CJ, if we were sitting together at a restaurant, I'd put my wallet on the table and just walk away, and I wouldn't worry about it at all. And I remember you saying that you would do the same thing, that you wouldn't be fearful of something like that. And that's just, like a kind of a tidbit, but general respect for another human, even though, well, how many times can we beat this horse? We disagree, right?
Yeah. So with that, you guys have read the topic bar, I'm sure, or the title rather. And I think this can be a very interesting conversation. I think it's going to get a lot to the core of where various Western societies are having their disputes. I'd like to have a brief monologue before we go into some of the topics. And it will be brief, I swear. But there's been a somewhat of a crossroads reached in Western civilization, I think, where as a general rule, there is still a big, very meaty middle in this sandwich of centrists. right? Of people who are maybe more pragmatic, of people who are maybe more practical, but it is shrinking daily, I think. And it appears to me like those who tend to identify with a more right-wing view have come to the conclusion that that leftism generally, and when I say leftism, I am saying the spectrum of left-wing beliefs. Because one thing, just a brief note, guys, that you got to understand is that both the right wing and the left wing are very divergent from each other. Like anarchists and communists are both considered on the left wing. They have virtually nothing in common, except for the fact that they are progressive, which is what makes you left wing. On the same side, a traditionalist conservative and a libertarian are both on the right wing, and they have virtually nothing in common, with the exception of conserving what you might consider the status quo, and some views regarding natural rights, which I think natural rights tend to be natural rights as defined as inherent things that people possess, right? I think on the left you tend to view rights more as a reality of nations more than an inherent quality within humans. At any rate, those on the right, various different views have tended to see leftism as something that is fundamentally opposed to rights and therefore cannot be compromised with. And I think those on the left have generally started to see the right as being authoritarian in nature, as being maybe too stuck in their ways, and as a result, also not to be trusted to preserve rights. You've also gotten to points where various different issues in different countries have led to what might be considered points of no return. I don't really want to say that because it sounds like it's a lot worse than maybe other people would like it to be. But like, for example, in Britain, the immigration issue has reached a fever pitch. There are just people who are anti-Islam and they will forever remain anti-Islam and they want the immigrants out in Britain. And there are other people who are opposed to the very idea of a monarchy and of the United Kingdom's borders and all that sort of thing. In America, we have a similar thing, but it tends to be more with cultural issues. Immigration is a big issue here, of course, but like I said, tends to be more with cultural issues. And then in Canada, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this from your perspective, but I think it tends to center around the scope of the state. It seems like Trudeau was a big point for right-wing Canadians to be like, I'm just done with this experiment of I don't know what you would call it. I guess from my perspective, it's state overreach, but that does sound like I'm assuming my perspective. And the reason I bring all that up is to say, I think today's conversation is going to get to a lot of the core of where these differences lie. It may even help us to try and identify if there's any way to get out of it, although I will admit I'm skeptical of that. And anyway, I just think it's going to be a good conversation. So with that all being said, you can, of course, comment on that little monologue.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think the best way to avoid a lot of the problems that we're facing is for you and I to be in charge more. No, so and I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but cooler heads typically prevail. And kind of one point of correction is that from our perspective, maybe I'll speak for myself. From my perspective in Canada, when there are many politicians who look at the Democratic Party in the U.S. and say, "Oh, those radical leftists," I just sit up here and I laugh, say, "Aren't you adorable?" Because like from my perspective, Biden was center right, Obama was center right, right? That you've never had a real you've never had a if Bernie Sanders had been elected president, then you'd know what it's like to have a president on the left. The Liberal Party in Canada is more centrist than anything else. And they're the ones who tend to be, who tend to stay in power for the longest. Like if you look at Justin Trudeau, he was in there 3 terms, right? Mm-hmm. Because he governed more from the center, because he understands that's where most Canadians are, which is why the Conservative Party in Canada, the PC or Progressive Conservative Party in Canada, tends to be shorter lived, and why the NDP has never seized federal power. Because everybody looks at them as like, oh, that's a little bit too much, man. So like you tend to see more kind of centrist rule in Canada, but even our centrist is more left than your left. right? And the other thing that's weird is that, and I always have to remind myself when I'm watching politics is, in Canada, red is the Liberal Party,
Right.
blue is the Conservative Party, and orange is the NDP, right? Or like a Democratic Socialist Party. So, but I think I agree almost without caveat about what you said early on, and that is that, in as much as it's the same that the middle class is disappearing, the middle ground is also disappearing. Nobody does extreme like extremists, and so there's this, I'll call it fear on both sides, that comes from the left and comes from the right. The other side is crazy, so we have to get crazy too. And it increases the divide, and the middle disappears. And it's really too bad, because the middle ground is where you're going to find, oftentimes, points of agreement, points of concession to come to agreement to get things done. When one person says it has to be all this way, the other person says, well, no, that's nuts, man. Now it's got to be all this way, and never the twain shall meet.
Right.
And that's where all this fervor comes in, right? And then, of course, then you have to vilify, right? The right has to say radical leftist, and the right has to say radical leftist, and the left has to say, communist authoritarians, right? So it's like and nobody wins that way. Most of all, everyone who doesn't make, more than $250,000 a year, they're the ones who really don't win.
And with that monologue, then, so I want to jump then now into some of these specific topics here, and actually, I'd like to kind of give you a little floor there to steer the conversation, only because, first off, it's kind, you're the guest.
I appreciate it.
But also, it's
or are you just scared I'm going to take it anyway?
Well,
No, it's good. It's good. So what I had done for everybody watching, I had sent. So CJ said, "Hey, what do you want to talk about?" And so I sent kind of like 4 quick little blurs. I'm like, "Hey, what about these things?" Any one of them could probably spark a 2-hour conversation, and we've been known to be superfluously verbose,
right?
But we'll see what kind of where it goes. So, but I want to kind of jump around a little bit. So the second point that I had sent you was something that was in the news about something that came up in U.S. news about these people wearing T-shirts, basically a white T-shirt. The left side of the T-shirt was all red, supposedly stained with blood.
Right.
And the caption was "Problem solved." This was thought to be a poke at the right, specifically TP USA, Turning Point USA, and the unmitigated, disastrous, terrible thing that should not have happened, and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Look, I don't think Charlie Kirk was a nice guy. I don't think Charlie Kirk was a good guy. I think he said terrible things. I think he did terrible things. And there's no planet where he should have been murdered for any of those things. It's an absolute abomination. And I cried when it happened. I genuinely did. Also because as a social worker, I thought to all these people that are going to be unbelievably traumatized by what they just saw.
Right.
So the thought was, people are poking fun. Oh, great. So Kirk's dead now. Problem solved, huh? And this was so far from the truth of the matter. It was posted by a group of high school math teachers for Halloween costumes. And the idea was problem solved being a math problem. And kind of a joke around problem solved, but kind of murder, bloody murder, as they solve these problems around Halloween. It had nothing whatsoever to do. So much so that the people who posted the original picture posted the same picture from the previous year when Charlie Kirk was healthy, happy, and alive.
Right.
Because they did the same thing. They just carried the theme on year to year. It had positively nothing to do with the horrific assassination of someone who said things I didn't agree with, but should have been free to say those things that I disagree with and live his life. And so he was like, these people, these teachers were vilified. People went out and doxed them and said these people have to be fired and all this other stuff. So they doxed all these teachers. And that was scary from my perspective, because gun ownership in Canada is actually a really hard thing to have. You can't just get a gun in Canada. So my thought was, these teachers are going to get killed, like in retribution, like in revenge for what they said about somebody that they didn't actually say and they didn't actually do. And it wasn't actually about that. So that was one of the first things.
Yeah. And so this is a fascinating thing for me, because first, let me give you a small antidote. It's not really an antidote because there are millions of people who experience this, but little story. So back in, I think it was about 2013. My memory's a tad fuzzy because that is now 12 years ago. But when I was in high school and early in my high school career, there was a story about Kanye West that went viral, right? And the story was Kanye West participates in a celebrity basketball game for charity, where he's playing against people with various disabilities, handicapped people. Mm. And the story was that he scored 100 points, which of course is like, excuse my French, but what an asshole. You know what I mean? To play against the handicapped kids and to just go off for 100 points. Like, what an insensitive insert adjective here, right? Mm-hmm. And it turned out that the story was false. But the reason the story went viral is because, knowing Kanye West, it was just so believable. You know what I mean? Like, there was nothing in that story that was like, oh, no, Kanye would never. It's like, of course he would. Of course he would. He literally referred to himself as God once. In fact, more than once. He had his wife showing up to the Oscars in quite literally nothing. You know, he has.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course the whole Hail Hitler song and all that kind of stuff. Like, it is, of course Kanye would do that sort of thing, but it wasn't actually true. He never did that. He never participated in the game. The game never happened. But it went viral because it was just so believable, right? Now, that being said, I think, before I get to what I'm going to say here, I think that it is not okay, let's just get this out of the way, that the teachers were doxxed. And I also think that it is not okay that people did not verify what they were seeing beforehand, because obviously there needs to be a, what's the word I'm looking for here? Well, you just need verification is basically what I'm trying to get at, right?
Trust but verify.
Exactly. You can't just assume what people are doing just because it looks a certain way to you, because you don't have all the context, right? Mm-hmm. That being said, the reason that story was so believable is because we've seen hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who would self-identify as left, in this country at least, praising the shooter and celebrating the murder and saying things like good riddance and all that sort of stuff. To give an example of that, actually, that just happened, today's Thursday, 2 days ago. The Attorney General elect, because he's not yet been sworn in Virginia, has very disturbing text messages talking about how he wants to see, like, his conservative opponent's children dead and stuff like that, right? And not only was he not removed for that sort of thing, he's actually elected. He is now the Attorney General elect in Virginia, right? Now, it's entirely possible that could have been a poor attempt at dark humor. You know, I guess really the text messages, to a certain extent, are without context. From what I was able to read, it did not seem like that was the case, but emphasis on the word "seem." It could have been, right?
Public officials have to be smarter. You can and rightly should be held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
And I would stand behind you and say, you try, like, for example, with what I do for a living, I have to be very careful. I have to make sure that there can never be even the whiff of impropriety,
Right.
because I work with members of very vulnerable sectors, and so, like, someone who was unscrupulous or evil could do terrible things in my position, truly evil things
Right.
to people. And so I have to go so far on the other side to ensure that there's not even a chance that it could even be brought up in a whiff. To the same thing, I would stand beside you and say that something like that, like, if it was something that was done as a poor attempt of dark humor, then maybe own it, publicize it, apologize for it, denounce it, and move on. Not doing those things, like, if you don't do those things, I think they're disqualifying.
Yeah, and I
Because
agree.
because you have to be like, you know what, that wasn't smart, right? So, like, but I also don't necessarily think I disagree with what you said, because going back to what I said before, the middle ground, like the middle class, is disappearing. And so you are seeing more people, quote unquote, extreme on both sides. There are ways when, like, I will identify as someone on the left, and then I will ask people to judge me on my actions, right? Not on the people I identify as a group with. People say, oh, you're a radical left. It's like, no, I'm not. I don't do any of those things. I don't go to protests. I don't, the most activism I do is the podcast, right? And, quoting stuff on Facebook and this, that, and the other thing. I don't go to protests. I don't go to abortion clinics where people are standing across the street with the holding up the signs, and I don't yell at those people. And I don't do any of those types of things. But what you're seeing is a lot of those things on the far left and on the far right. So I can't in good conscience disagree with what you're saying. In the same way that you have someone like, and this is something that just popped into my head there, because when you talked about this governor-elect, pardon me. Was it governor-elect? It was governor.
Attorney General.
Attorney General, pardon me. Attorney General-elect. Because you have other people who I hope, I would hope that Nick Fuentes saying he looks up to Stalin will be immortalized so that he never has the capacity to hold any kind of public office.
Right.
Because Stalin, a lot of times people will say, Stalin was someone who didn't have belief in God, and look how many, all these people that he killed. And here's someone who self-identifies as someone on the right, saying that that date, whatever that date was a special day to him because it reminded him of something having to do with Stalin, whether it was a birthday or whatever it had to do with him, and how he idolized him. And then how Tucker Carlson said, well, we'll circle back to that, which of course he didn't do, because he realized the toxicity of that statement and he didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I think we could go back and forth, and we could probably spar with examples on both sides, going from not particularly wise to outright stupid, that someone on the left might say, to unwise to outright stupid that someone on the right says, right? And I think we could spar back and forth probably for quite a while on those things. But I think what it does is it identifies and hopefully would shine a light on what I said, in that nobody does extreme like extremists, and we need to find a way to come together more. So if you and I are diametrically opposed, and yet, I've never flipped you off or done any of these other types of things or this, that, and the other thing, other than sparring with one of your friends on Facebook last night, Like, how do we? This is an interesting question. I'm curious as to what people might say in the comments. People that are watching or will watch this later. How do we bring, like, or can we bring people together? Can we? It's like there's that song from, you're familiar with the group Bare Naked Ladies?
Right.
So there's this one, there's the song they do, "Lovers in a Dangerous Time," like, which is a cover, obviously. They at one point, one of the lyrics is, "You have to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight." How do we, like, how can we do that? Diametrically opposed.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me because I think I'm skeptical, to be honest, that that's possible. Part of the issue, and I want to be clear, because for those who haven't gotten this already, and I'm sure it's fairly obvious given the title, but we don't live in the same country, right?
Yeah.
And so I am speaking from a strictly American perspective when I say this.
Right.
In two different ways, this is in a lot of ways a one-side issue, and I want to be clear here. It's not a one-side issue in the sense that there is no extremist. I mean, I think Nick Fuentes is a POS. If I'm being very clear with you, there is absolutely nothing positive about his influence. He says right things occasionally, but that's actually more damaging than good, because then somebody sees the right things and says, "Oh, yeah, hey, that's a good idea." I mean, Hitler said right things occasionally. That's why he got elected. You know what I mean? That's cheese that gets you in the mousetrap. So if somebody wants to go in the comments, well, Nick Fuentes said this one thing that you probably agree with. It's like, okay, sure, but that just reels you in so that you can listen to all the crap he says. That's so much worse. Like the insanely
you end up,
racist,
with the broken clock thing, right?
yeah, exactly, right,
Twice a day.
exactly. But in two different ways in America, this is, I think, a uniquely left problem, and the two ways are this, right? Way number one is politically. I think you and I both, were we both in the States, would be to the right and or left of our respective representatives, right? So you would probably be to the left of the Democrats, and I tend to be to the right of the Republicans, right? I am unelectable in a major position in this country, given my positions. Traditionalist conservatives have historically failed all the time. Alan Keyes running for Senate, Alan Keyes running for representative, Fred Thompson running for president, although he did actually get a senatorial position. He was a little bit more moderate when he got that position, to be fair. It's Pat Buchanan running for president. Me and Pat have certain disagreements, mostly as it pertains to Israel, but nevertheless, I'm damn near unelectable. On the flip side of that, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Mamdani, who would probably align more with the views that you would have, they're not mainstream, but they're definitely popular, and they have elected positions, right? One is now the mayor of New York City. One has been senator in Vermont for almost probably over 40 years at this point. And obviously AOC being a representative, and so on and so forth, right? And so in that sense, the right tends to hover around the centrist positions in America, while the left increasingly does not, right? The Hillary Clintons and the Barack Obamas are less and less popular in left-wing politics as time goes on. Whereas Donald Trump, this is going to be a shock, I think, to a lot of people who aren't like political junkies, but Donald Trump is to the left of George W. Bush, actually, in a lot of different ways. Now, there are certain things he has that are unique to him, like his tariff policy and stuff like that. And of course, his braggadocious language is unique to him entirely. We really don't have a comparison in American politics, not since Andrew Jackson, at least, which is almost 200 years ago. But, Trump is very pro gun control to an extent, not gun bans or anything like that, but he's supported red flag laws and stuff like that in the past. He is pro-choice. He is pro-LGBT marriage. He agrees with the idea of having at least some kind of a welfare state, albeit to the right of guys like Hillary and Obama, right? In the election of '92, Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, which I just mentioned W, but Trump was a Clinton supporter. And it's not that his views have changed, it's that America's views have changed to where Clinton is not really popular on the left any longer. You know what I mean? And he's the representative of the Republican Party. Whereas on the flip side, you're seeing, I think, more and more push leftward on the left side. And that's the first. And if I can just very briefly, because that was a lot. The second way in which I find this to be a uniquely left-wing phenomenon is the violent rhetoric also on the right makes you unelectable. Jay Jones, of course, receiving the Attorney General's position.
Violent rhetoric should be discounting for anyone, left, right, center, or otherwise. It is interesting. Sorry to jump in, but it is interesting. I mean, I am more Republican than Donald Trump is.
Yeah, I think that's true.
There are. It wouldn't take you long to find video of Donald Trump. I think it was actually on Howard Stern when he said, if I ever did run for politics, I'd run as a Republican because they're not real smart. He is, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. He is a useful idiot. He's like, you talked about his vocabulary. He has less than 100-word vocabulary. This has just been demonstrated to be true. You watch all of his speeches, and he uses adjectives more than any other human I've ever heard speak. And like, he's not real. Like, for someone who claims to be a stable genius, he really isn't intelligent at all. And so, but he is the useful idiot to the people on the right, because all you have to do is tell him how good he is, and he loves you. He is the epitome. He may, and this is saying something because I was never a fan of the Clintons. Christopher Hitchens wrote a book called No One Left to Lie To, which is an expose on the Clintons. They did terrible things, both with their foundation and otherwise, let alone getting a Hummer in the Oval Office. But you have Trump, who's like the ultimate pay to play, right? Whether it be the crypto stuff that's going on, or a Qatari jet, or just the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But the right put up with him because he's the useful idiot. He will maintain popularity and control until he is no longer useful, which will be the ballot in 2028, when he is constitutionally restricted from running. That is when you will see the firm departures from anything and all things Trump, trying to go back to more quote unquote traditional Republican values. That is when those things will happen, because everyone is petrified of pissing him off. And I think that I don't think that is even an arguable point. To the other thing that you said, this is, I agree with two things that you said. One, because I think is a uniquely a U.S. problem. And two, because you're talking about the violence on the left. You do see more violence on the left from my point of view. At least not necessarily overt, but like the undercurrent of, than you do in Canada. One, because I think we're just more passive people in general. Not meant as a slight at all, but just tend to be more passive people in general. But also because, again, like these stretching, right, of the extremes. And I think you see it less when there is less blatant injustice like there is right now within the United States, whether it be the shutdown or the removal of food aid while a ballroom is being built on a White House, and when Trump holds a party at Mar-a-Lago, as a tribute to the Roaring Twenties, where the banner said a little party never killed anyone, while people are actually not able to feed themselves, and the unbelievable wealth that's been redistributed and stuff like that. And so I think, and you posted something about this, CJ, on Facebook, saying, it's like, it's harder. It seems harder to feed families when you're feeding all these other families. And I posted a very long response to that, that I don't necessarily have to go over here. Go see CJ's Facebook page and see what you have to think about my comment. But I think you are more liable to scream louder and scream, in some cases, perhaps more violently, in the face of blatant injustice than you are at things you disagree with but aren't so unbelievably wrong just on the face of it.
Well, I think there's two things I would want to comment there. I think the first is, I do think the ballroom thing is more optics than anything else, because the shutdown, and so for those who don't know, you need to pass a 60 vote threshold in the United States in order to pass a budget bill, because that's the filibuster limit, right? The Republicans currently have 53 seats in the Senate. So it's not actually possible for the Republican government to pass the budget bill alone, right?
Right.
Now,
and it's a good thing that, it's a good thing they can't. Like, what are the Democrats holding out on?
Right now, it's primarily things that have to do with healthcare.
Right. Because they're trying to ensure that for people who fall below the threshold of, I think it's people that make less than, I think it was the stat I saw that was less than $70,000 a year, face the possibility of healthcare cost increases that will be debilitating to them. Like at least 100%, right? This is something that doesn't make any sense to me, because we have a single payer system here in Canada, and I pay an absolute metric load of taxes, and I never get asked how I want to pay for that when I go to the doctor.
Well, so you also, though, if I may, there is a slight difference here that is another uniquely American problem, right? Where and actually, really quickly, I do want to finish this one point about.
Yeah, sorry, I dragged us off there.
No, you're totally good. But the point there is to say that the SNAP benefits are being withheld by Democrats because they think it is a good bargaining tool to pass the healthcare thing, right? Because you need at least those. Well, technically, you don't need 7 Democrats. You could also get the 2 independents, and Angus King, I think, is still the independent from Maine. I'm fairly certain he is voting yes on reopening the government, if I remember correctly. Bernie is not. But nevertheless, you need at least 7 extra non-Republican votes to get the government reopened, right? And to my understanding, I think Angus King and John Fetterman are the only non-Republicans who have been voting yes to reopen the government, right? So now I will admit that is bad optics when you see the rebuilding of a ballroom, and then also there's a lack of SNAP benefits here, right? But it really is more of an optical thing, because of the fact that if you actually look at where the votes are coming out, and do they believe they're justified? Sure, they do. I obviously don't. But nevertheless, this is a issue where Democrats are using this as a bargaining tool. They're basically saying, look, the longer we keep, nobody blames the senator from Wisconsin. I don't even know who that is. They do blame the president, though. So the longer we withhold SNAP benefits, the worse Trump looks. It doesn't really matter if he's trying to get him passed or not. You know what I mean?
No, but the hard part is that, I mean, Trump has said in the past, like, there's video, you can find video of him saying, if there's a government shutdown, it's a blemish on the president, because he's the one who's supposed to bring people together to make a deal. And the problem is that the Democrats aren't doing anything different than the Republicans did before, when everything was flipped over. When the Democrats had the majority, they needed Republican support. So be like, look, we want these couple little things. We want these couple little things, and then we'll vote for it. What the Democrats are doing is saying, like, extend the healthcare subsidies to keep people from going broke over healthcare. And then we'll do this. And what the Republicans have said is, look, just vote for it and then we'll work it out. And I'm sorry, but the Republicans have demonstrated that they're not trustworthy.
Well, and this is where I think we get to another.
Like
and this is the issue I was going to kind of.
For that reason.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
And this is where that second point I was going to bring up, I think, is very relevant, right? There is a uniquely American problem as it pertains to any of these issues, right? So, like, for example, you were talking about how you pay a lot in taxes for a single-payer healthcare system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason why Canada and numerous nations in Europe and so on and so forth have been able to pay for a healthcare system, even with the exuberant taxes, has a lot to do with the United States of America's policy as it pertains to military and as it pertains to trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's two things there. And Trump has shaken this up to, as you guys probably could have guessed earlier, I'm not a Trump fan. I will admit I'm not a fan of what I'm about to say.
Right.
Trump has shaken this up quite a bit, actually, because the two things are mainly this. Number one, for the most part, NATO nations do not have to pay for their own defense. This has become a really big point of conversation. In fact, for anybody who's interested, there's a British gentleman by the name of Simon Whistler who does two channels. Well, he does like 12 channels, but two in particular that I'm going to mention: Political Fronts and War Fronts. Consider checking them out and subscribing. He's awesome. He's also not a right winger, which I point out simply to say that this information I'm giving you is not like from Tucker Carlson. It's from someone who's probably more along the lines of Piers Morgan. So just as a point of order there, right? And he's pointed out how like Trump saying I might leave NATO is being seen as like an existential threat to European nations because they don't really pay for their own defense budget. And now, of course, Russia is an aggressor on their border, and a lot of them are terrified of it. And they have small militaries comparative to their population.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them have small military budgets compared to their population. Others just have such a small population that they could spend 50% of their GDP on the military and it just wouldn't matter, right? So the United States having $1 trillion plus military budget allows other nations to spend some of their resources elsewhere. And then the second thing has to do particularly with trade. The United States tends to operate in a free trade society, or we tend to operate as a free trade society, rather. And we tend to operate at a trade deficit, meaning that there's less money coming into the United States than there is going out, right?
Right.
These are two things that Trump, with his tariff policy, has tried to change. That will maybe address that in a minute, because it's whether or not that works is a different question. But the point there is that for other nations, most of which do have their own tariffs, and I'm not sure about Canada in this particular regard, but most nations do actually have their own tariffs. The United States before Trump didn't, right? At least not since like McKinley. It's been almost 100 years. Actually, over 100 years. McKinley died in 1901. Most other nations actually bring in a profit by trade. The United States actually usually operates at a trade deficit. And the reason I bring those two things up is just to say, you know, when other nations talk about like, well, we have this higher tax rate and are able to pay for healthcare, even the most liberal economists have pointed out, we are already $1 trillion over budget every year, and universal healthcare would add another $1 trillion every year to cover all 300 million people in America, or even just some of the more smaller segments of the population, like those under 70,000. Those under 70,000 is, for the most part, the majority of the population, right? So I think from that perspective, it becomes really difficult to, if America truly did isolate and withhold from the rest of the world, I don't think most European countries could pay for their own healthcare. I think you're seeing, and I know Canada's not a European country, but I think you're seeing right now in Europe a really, really difficult decision that people are having to make, because they need to. America's not going to fit the bill, and Russia's invading at the border. They need to start diverting money to their defense budget that they previously never had to because they thought Uncle Sam was going to fit the bill. And Trump is now saying that they won't. You know what I mean? So like that.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of stuff there. So countries like Germany, etc., like they're doing just fine. Canada, I had to Google it because I had to actually look it up because I wasn't 100% sure. The budget currently about to be passed here in Canada has no increase in the tax rates for any segment of the Canadian population. And we are increasing our defense spending 2.6 times. European countries are doing just fine. The isolationist perspective, the reason why it doesn't work, well, there's lots of reasons why, and there's also a lot of reasons why the U.S. operates at a trade deficit. One of the reasons why the tariffs are so wonky is because you also, like Trump instituted a tariff against Brazil, where there's a trade surplus. But this just demonstrates his just lack of knowledge on general things in like everything. When he was talking to our new prime minister, Mark Carney, about it, there was like some of the talk that was going on in the background is like, we are 10% of your population. On what planet can we buy 10 times as much from you? Where would we put it? What would we do with it? There aren't enough people to consume it.
Right.
It's not possible. With 330 million people, like, we just can't buy that much stuff. Like, it's just not possible. And trade deficits are not necessarily a bad thing. The free trade agreement that was in place that Trump redid in 2018. And then last year, in 2018, he got rid of NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, and replaced it with CUSMA. And last year said, I don't know who made this deal, but it's the dumbest deal that's ever been made. He's the one that made it. That's how much he doesn't know. All of the things that I have people that work in the auto industry. Parts cross back and forth, like sometimes 10 times before a car is finally assembled, right? And that's why the cost of things is going up. The only tariff, and this is a tariff that gets pointed out a lot, that Canadians have on U.S. stuff, and it's on dairy. It is a tariff that has never been triggered because it's not possible for us to bring in that much dairy. So if we brought in 215% more than we do, which we could never do, then there would be a tariff on U.S. dairy. That is a tariff that has never been triggered. It was put in there basically as, oh yeah, we'll put this in there, but it's never been triggered. It's not even possible to trigger it because you're 10 times our population. We can't drink that much milk or eat that many eggs and cheese. Right. There's just so many problems with this stuff. And now what Canada has done, for example, and then Trump says dumb things like, oh, we'll sell you jets and maybe we'll just have this little peanut part in it that if you piss us off, we'll just turn your jets off. So Canada's buying jets from France. Right. What we've done is what there was this unbelievable melding, a seamless trade thing that was going on where everybody won between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And what the United States has done is make it so Mexico is looking in other ways. Canada is looking in other ways. And so is everybody else. And it's you guys that are getting left in the lurch. And,
well, and there's when it comes to
healthcare, just the last thing, when it comes to healthcare, with 10 times the tax base, 10 times the tax base. If you wanted to do single payer healthcare, you could do better than anybody. You would be the gold standard in the world for single payer healthcare if you did it. And nobody would have to pay more. Your deficit would not increase a single dollar if you cut out the tax shelters for the top earners and just had them pay their fair share, it's already been demonstrated that they're not going to go anywhere because, like I said in my Facebook post, the United States of America is still the best landing ground for people who want unfettered capitalism. They're not going anywhere because they know no matter where they go, they're never going to make as much money as they do there. But this is the carrot that gets dangled. Oh, don't tax us more. We'll leave. You're not going anywhere. Give me a break. You could have the best healthcare in the world, and all this propaganda that was spread first by Ronald Reagan, and then by H.W. Bush. He famously said, if you want to talk about single payer healthcare, ask a Canadian. You don't have, like, the government has no say in my healthcare. I don't have to call anybody before I go to the doctor and go to any doctor, any specialist, any surgeon, anywhere in the country. I have a card that sells Health Canada. I go for any doctor from coast to coast to coast, and I don't have to say, oh, sorry, I forgot my debit card or my credit card at home. And I never get asked, how do you want to pay for that today, sir? It is just, there is so much rhetoric spread, and it is it's just untrue. And I'm sorry for babbling so much.
No, you're good. I think there is. So I'll work from numbers, right? So the United States budget, and we can't really judge for 2025, of course, because the year's not over. But the United States budget in 2024 was $2.3 trillion over what we had, right? So that was $2.3 trillion in deficit added to the debt. We ended up hitting $35 trillion for the first time, right?
How much of that is military industrial complex?
Well,
like
actually, not as much as you think. So the military industrial,
than the next 25 countries, 24 of them are allies.
So it's a good question, but actually, it's not nearly as much as people think, right? So the United States federal budget is roughly $1 trillion, give or take, right? And like you say, it is more than the vast majority of other nations put together. Or vast majority of the next 25 put together. I'll put it that way, right? But actually, if you look at what we spend the most money on, it's welfare, and it's not close. It's the United States welfare system spends, I think, roughly $3 trillion a year on different welfare programs, right? So, in fact, I want to pull up a graph here if I can, so that I can kind of show you.
Yeah, while you pull that up, welfare reform is a massive problem. We actually went through in the 1990s. We went through massive welfare reform in Canada, and I can give you a personal story. One of my sisters, who since she passed away in 2001, unfortunately, but she was on quote unquote welfare. She had at the time 2 children. She lived in a rent controlled apartment, so she paid $150 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment. Her welfare check was $3,600 a month. She lived better than my parents did.
Right.
So welfare reform absolutely has to happen. And we went through. Now, I think they cut too much, because she went from getting about like between $3,000 and $4,000 a month to $1,200 a month. So I think that in some ways they cut too much, especially for people who are single. If you're a woman with children on welfare, you can live okay, because there are levels that they will always maintain. But single men got hit the hardest. They went from getting like around $2,000 a month to getting $675 a month. So, I mean, they quite literally could put a roof over the head and that was it. Right?
Yeah. And
I'm not saying that welfare reform doesn't have to happen, because it absolutely does.
But so now notice, now you have these two different, and I agree with you in terms of that, right? You now have these two different issues, right? So if we look at this graph here, and I'm glad I was able to find it. So everything that is grayed out is non-discretionary spending. So you just have to cut that to the side. You cannot possibly cut that spending, unfortunately, right? All the colored stuff here on the right is discretionary spending. And if you look, you got defense in this green right here. Let me see if I can zoom in. I can. Cool. Defense is this green right here. It's about 2.9% of America's GDP, and it says here 850 billion. So it's, like I said, right around $1 trillion. And then even this non-defense 960 billion, that you can add that to, you can't add that to this category, but non-welfare is the point, right? That you can add that to the category of not being welfare. Social Security, 1.5 trillion. Medicare, actually more than defense. Medicaid, another 618 billion. And if you guys can't see the numbers, it's 866 billion on Medicare, 850 billion on defense. And this is for the fiscal year 2024. We don't have numbers for 2025 yet. Income security programs, another 370 billion, and then other, which is of course going to be various things, 762 billion. So combining these numbers here, right? I mean, 1.5, let's just round this to 8, which is 66 billion less than it actually is, but just to make it a round number, 2.3, that's 6, that's 2.9, that this is another 3, that'd be 3.2 trillion dollars in $3.2 trillion in non-military spending on the budget, and then another 850 billion on the spending on top of that, right? So what you have is you have this double-edged sword in the United States then, where on one end, as I think Trump has rightly pointed out, you do have an issue where we are spending we are spending in military budgets, not just what we use, but also what we need to defend other nations, right? Canada, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys just increased to 1.38% GDP. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it's 1.38, and that works out to like 2.6 times what it was.
Yeah, because before it was like, well, it was very low is the point.
I don't even know what it was.
The NATO debt, or not debt, what do they call it? Limit is supposed to be 2%.
It was supposed to be 2 or something like that.
Exactly, 2% for each nation, right? Now, I don't know how much of the panic is happening in Canada because Canada is not in Europe, but I do know in Europe, nations are losing their minds over not being able to pay these military budgets because they genuinely fear that if Trump's not going to fit the bill, or to be more clear, if the U.S. is not going to fit the bill, then they have no defense. And this is a really big problem right now in France, in Britain, in Italy. And again, I would recommend, if people don't want to take my word for it, you could check out that guy, Simon Whistler, on War Fronts and Political Fronts, who does a fantastic breakdown of this from a genuinely neutral perspective. He is not, he's probably more left than right, but he is not left wing or right wing in the same sense that we would be, right? So you have that on one end. But even then, if you were to cut United States defense spending entirely, you'd still be $1.5 trillion over budget. I mean, if you're not giving a single penny to the defense budget, you'd still be $1.5 trillion over budget. So then to add more money onto that in the form of universal health care, obviously it's kind of a simple math thing, right? If we're 1.5 trillion over now, then even a single penny means we're more than 1.5 trillion. If we're going to
have to remember that Medicare, like the Medicare and Medicaid, they go away, and then that's replaced by one number. It's not added to; it's replaced by.
Well, and that is fair, but it is one larger number. So we'll say so, and
it is one larger number, but that's also fed by like. So okay, just take a guess what my tax rate is.
Say it one more time. Sorry.
Take a guess at what my tax rate is.
I'll
give you a hint. My wife is in the highest tax bracket in the country.
So probably I would guess,
and I'm in the third highest. My wife makes a lot more than
75%. Is that about
accurate? No, it's nowhere near that high.
Okay.
It's nowhere near that high. But no. So like I am more than 40%.
Okay.
Tax bracket, right? Nobody in the US has a tax margin that high. Nobody. If you took someone that made $1 billion and you have lots of billionaires. And you said, well, your tax rate is now 40%, right? So that's $400 million. Do you think their standard of living is going to go down because they only have $600 million left?
No, but I also don't think $400 million and even multiply that over multiple times. I mean, if you took every billionaire's entire net worth in the United States, I don't think you'd even make it to the Medicare budget alone, let alone everything else. You know what I mean?
I think that's the thing, is that I think you would. Like in Canada, you actually have like kind of a low ceiling of it's around $35,000. $35,000, you basically don't pay any tax. You pay taxes, and then like if you fall below the federal minimums, you just get it all back at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You pay sales taxes, right? We have a HSC or harmonized sales tax of 13%. It's 13% on anything you buy, whether it's you get a haircut or you buy a bottle of milk. It's all the same, 13%. So like there are other ways that comes into effect. And there are lots of states that like don't even have tax, like don't even have a state tax, they don't even have a sales tax, right? There's lots of other ways to do it. And I'm not an economist. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, look, I've got all the solutions. But I do have friends who actually do this kind of stuff, and they've said it's like it's not rocket surgery. Like you could actually make this work, and in a way that would be better for everybody. Like friends of mine live in just outside Kansas City, Independence, Missouri, and their daughter is asthmatic. And she uses two in puffers every month. The blue one that everybody knows about, that's the rescue one, the orange one, right? Everybody knows about those ones, right? My daughter uses the same ones, right? They pay about $350 a month for her inhalers. My daughter pays $60 a month. You guys pay the highest numbers for things like asthma supplies, supplies for diabetes, than anywhere else in the world. And that's all part of this complex. Nobody loves your system more than the insurance companies in the US.
Well, and there's even some agreement I can have with that. I think our solutions would be much different, but I will freely admit that there is a problem in the American medical system, and I'll give you an antidote about it. So I recently had my first child, and my grandpa sent me his bill his mother's bill for when he was born to give us a comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother had to spend $250 in 1947 for her pregnancy, or not the pregnancy. Yeah, the actual birth, right?
Right.
We had to pay $16,000, right? Which is, of course, dramatically different. And the other thing that's different about it is it can't be accounted for by mere inflation. Inflation is terrible, but $250 in 1947 money, I think, comes out to like probably 3,000, maybe 3,500.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. It's still, you're still getting robbed.
Yeah, exactly. So there is still, let's just call it 35 because that was the high number. There's still going to be $12,500 unaccounted for there, right? And of course, wages have not dramatically increased since that time. They have in a sense. My grandpa made $1.15 for minimum wage back when he was a kid, but also $1.15 in since they were using a gold standard, they had silver coins. $1.25 would have been worth like $31 today.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's like your national minimum wage hasn't increased in a decade or more.
No, it's still $7.25 even to this day.
Yeah. I don't know what the minimum wage here is in Canada. I think it's, if memory serves, it's even even with the exchange rate, if our money was your money, our minimum wage, I think, is $12 an hour in your money.
That wouldn't surprise me. That definitely wouldn't surprise me. I think though, so the point there then is I agree to some extent that there is an issue that needs solved. No doubt.
Right.
No doubt. Right. The question becomes, how do you solve it though? And in my estimation, it's like, so say we were to, we'll just take this graph here again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say we were to combine these two, the Medicaid and the Medicare, which if we're actually rounding, it'd be closer to about 1.5 trillion in those two. So Social Security and Medicaid, Medicare together are roughly the same amount of money, 1.5 trillion, right? And right now that only, let's see, I think you have to make under 40,000 to apply for those two. I'm not certain, but I know I don't qualify. And I make right around 43,000 a year. So I think it's 40,000. So, and that's $1.5 trillion, right? Now, if it were to be everybody or even double that, which it wouldn't quite be a straightforward double, because I think there are more people making less than 40,000 than there are making between 40 and 80,000. Nevertheless, let's call it an increase 50%. That's now a $2.25 trillion budget, right? In Medicare alone, or in healthcare alone, which doesn't account for social safety nets, which doesn't account for Social Security, which again, that's a $1.5 trillion debt right there, and which doesn't account for military spending, which, if cut, would negatively impact other nations. I don't necessarily, from an American perspective, I'll be quite honest with you, I don't necessarily even think that's a negative. In the friendliest way possible, and I do genuinely mean this, Canada can pay for its own military. I don't want to. You know what I mean? And now that's to an extent, of course, because it's mutually beneficial for our nations to have a military alliance. So if somebody were to invade Canada, say it was Russia, I actually think it's beneficial for America's interest if we got involved, because
and it would also trigger Article 5 of the treaties, right? So you'd
have to get involved.
Yeah.
But even if we didn't have that treaty, you know, I'm not completely opposed to getting involved in foreign wars every time, because sometimes it's beneficial for your country. I actually think, just to give you an example that actually is happening, and to be clear for the audience perspective, I was 100% against Iraq, and I thought that the way that Biden did it was terrible, but it was high time we got out of Afghanistan as well. There's no need for us to be bombing Iran. I love Israel. They have a perfectly powerful military. They can do it themselves. Yep. And I don't really think there's a reason for us to be getting involved in Ukraine either, especially if the rest of the European nations already are. That being said, there was a situation, and still is, because it's still going on, in Haiti. Haiti, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist right now because the government is just completely collapsed, right? Haiti is
between natural disasters and corruption,
yeah, exactly, and an insane gang problem. I mean, the Colombian gang problem in the 80s was ridiculous, but the gang problem in Haiti is the kind of thing that is like, it sounds like it's fiction. You know what I mean? So Haiti is 600 miles away from southern Florida, whether we want them to or not. And I do believe in strict immigration controls, but it doesn't really matter. Haitians will come to the United States, not because they're nasty or something like that, but because they're terrified of there's nothing for them in Haiti, right? So we will have a refugee crisis in the United States soon, if we don't already. And I think we actually kind of do right now when it comes to Haiti. And we will have an increase in foreign, what would you call that? Belligerents coming over from Haiti, and in gang activity coming over from Haiti, not necessarily in the refugees, but Some of the refugees will be in that category. And on top of that, there's just going to be this now essentially gang state 600 miles from our border. So what's the point I'm getting at? I actually think the United States should intervene. I think the United States should put soldiers in Haiti and restore order, because it's not just good for the Haitian people. It actually fits our national interests. We don't want a refugee crisis in here. And the only way to prevent a refugee crisis in the United States is to make sure Haitians don't feel like they need to leave. You know what I mean? So how's anybody?
It almost sounds like you want to go in there for humanitarian reasons.
Well, yes and no. Yes, and you have to. I hate to word things this way because I want people to know, like in my heart of hearts, I am deeply troubled for what's going on with Haiti. I'm also deeply troubled for what's going on in Ethiopia, but I don't think America should get involved because there are, unfortunately, nations do need to operate in their own interest, and Ethiopia just has none for the United States perspective. Now, from a moral perspective, I hate that that's even a consideration, because what's going on in Ethiopia is horrible, and people hopefully will be held accountable for that sort of thing, right?
And from a moral perspective, you want to help everybody because you're human.
Exactly, right? But from a political perspective, I just don't think it's viable for America to get involved. Now, from the Haitian perspective, those two things happen to interline, because if the Haitian people fear for their lives walking through the streets of Port-au-Prince, the reality is that is going to negatively impact the United States. And so we should get involved. And if there was President Jay, I would be asking Congress for a declaration of war on the revolutionaries in Haiti, not the Haitian government itself, which basically doesn't exist anyhow. But I think it is important for us to. So what's my whole point in saying this? I'm not saying, to bring this back to Canada or Europe, I'm not saying there's no scenario in which we shouldn't have military alliance, in which the United States shouldn't fund certain things, right? Like if it benefits us, then we should. And the reality is, for Canada at least, Europe not as much, but for Canada at least, it's going to benefit us more often than not. At the same time, I don't want to spend more money than I need to on Canada's defense budget. You know what I mean? So
I hear that.
Where does this all come into play then with the budget? I would be down to reduce the United States foreign aid budget and the United States defense budget in a lot of different ways, even as a conservative, because I think there's a lot of ways that we could do that, and it wouldn't actually impact our defense at all, because it's not for our defense. It's for other people's defense, or it's for maintaining a base in Honduras. To this day, I have no idea why we have a base. I have a cousin who was stationed in Honduras a year ago. I don't know why. That's absurd. We've never been at war with Honduras, and Honduras is not under any sort of threat from somebody who's an enemy of us. Makes no sense. Right?
I love Honduras. I vacationed there a couple times.
Yeah, and it's a great place. But why do I have United States soldiers there? You know what I mean? That makes no sense.
Can't answer that one.
But even with those spending cuts being made, which would negatively impact a lot of countries, because at that point, Canada may not have to hit the 2% because they don't have an existential threat. Britain will, because Britain is scared of Russia, and France will because they're scared of Russia, and they need to recruit more, and they need to, you know what I mean? They need to do all these different things that they're now currently allowed to get away with because the United States spends as much money as it does on defense. But even with those cuts, which would cut, accidentally said a cuss word, even with those cuts,
Paging Dr. Freud.
Right?
Yep.
Which would negatively impact our allies, we would still have trillions of dollars over the budget in Social Security, in food stamps, in assisted living, in Medicare. And the reality in the United States is that's the stuff nobody wants to cut, because nobody votes for you if you say you want to cut that stuff. I want to cut that stuff, because I think we need to. I don't think a $35 trillion debt is sustainable. And in fact, a big part of the reason why inflation is as bad as it is, I think, is because the only way you can maintain a debt like that is by printing more money. And the more money you have in circulation, the less value your money has. The gold standard, people always want to focus on the gold standard. Gold standard, I think, is important. But the reality is printing money is the problem. And the higher the budget goes, the higher the debt goes, the more you have to print currency and devalue currency in the process. So all of this is just to say, while I understand why people want a universal healthcare system, I just don't think we can do it. There's just too much money being spent elsewhere unless we want to dramatically slash things like Social Security, which might even be a good idea if we can find another way to accomplish what Social Security accomplishes. That might not even be a bad idea because it is $1.5 trillion in the budget.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you have stuff like in Canada, it all came down to one guy. One guy, his name is Tommy Douglas. He is the father of the Canadian healthcare system. And he managed a way, to work it out. And I mean, look at Great Britain. Great Britain did it at the end of World War II.
Right.
When Great Britain had been blitzkrieged almost out of existence. And that's when they did it. And so I think there's certainly ways to do it, but I think we've reached the point where we've gone outside of either of our scope of expertise. I'll just speak for myself as a social worker. I've reached the cap of my expertise on economics.
I want to be an economist, but I'm not. So there was another point that we wanted that could be a great point of conversation, actually, that we wanted to address, and actually there's kind of two here, I think, because I think the abortion category is going to fit into this. But you had brought up wanting to discuss Joel Webbon and some of the stuff he's recently said in regards to women. Now, I'll let you take the floor here for a minute so you can kind of approach with what exactly you wanted to speak about there. But let's go ahead and divert there, I think, because I think that'd be a good idea.
I think rather than that, I could just play what he said.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have, please forgive the way I'm going to play it. This is just coming off my phone. I just recorded it this way. So he doesn't, of course, he's a quote unquote pastor, so he doesn't swear or anything in this. This is from his own lips. Oh, it's going to come through I'm going to have to take off my headphones for a moment.
Well, yeah, if you send me the video in the private chat, I can share screen if you'd like.
You can do it this way.
Okay.
Who are the victims currently in our American context? Well, I'll tell you, context today are heritage Americans. If you are a man, if you are a Christian man, if you are a non-sodomite, gay, furry man, and if you are a white man, then you are objectively on the books, be it Ivy League schools, or be it the hiring processes of Fortune 500 companies, or be it certain tax brackets, or be it just the general cultural milieu, or even among the perception of your local elders at your local church. If you are a young, white, single, straight man, you are, in the year of our Lord 2025, here in these United States, a legitimate victim. Women are atrocious today. They are immodest. They're hoes. They're dumb, like literally intellectually unintelligent. They are shallow. They are deceitful. They are wicked. They are vile. They vote for trannies. I'm not making it up. It is a objectively 45-point difference between young men and young women today. That's where we're at. 45-point difference. Women are radical progressives.
Did that come through okay?
Yeah, heard it very clear, actually. And audience, let me know if you guys heard it clear as well. I certainly did, but I obviously want to make sure you guys did as well. Go ahead, though. Ooh, the camera.
Yeah, so, I mean, I found what he said to be repellent in every way, shape, and form. there was no plus side to anything that he said. There's also no truth to what he said. But I mean, it's like, you kind of, let one slip a few minutes ago, but nothing you said was anywhere near as vile as what escaped his pie hole. I mean, that's just positively despicable in every way, shape, and form. I've said before, like we talked a minute ago, I told you my wife makes a lot more money than I do. She's also like, I'll tell people this kind of like, it's just a kind of like a funny kind of joke, but my wife is one of the smartest people I know. She has a photographic memory. She's brilliant. One of the smartest people I know. And I had Lawrence Krauss on my podcast. And I still say my wife's one of the smartest people I know. And to say that, like you heard what he said, they're just not intelligent. Like, I'm sorry, but I would compare my wife's IQ to Joel Webbin's any day of the week. He doesn't even use the word objectively properly.
So, yeah, and this will be a interesting point, because I think there is a what's the word I'm looking for here? There is a abrasion to a lot of what he, and there's even a lot of things that I disagree with Joel Webbin, to be clear. I do think that we do have something of an issue with so let's back up a minute. Progressives in the United States, or women rather in the United States, especially women under the age of 35, are overwhelmingly progressive. Mm-hmm. So that's the first point that needs to be made, because I think it's the crux of what Joel Webbin has an issue with there, right?
Well, he's really bad at the message delivery then.
Yeah, and I'll even grant you that. I
mean, you're married. Is your wife dumb?
No.
Is your wife straight up not intelligent?
No, not at all.
Well, he was talking about your wife too.
Right. And that's why I say it's like, so that we need to take a step back then I think, because you're exactly right that Joel Webbin in wording stuff, you got to have tact. In fact, even in the unintelligent comment, there is something to be said about, and this is not a general rule for women, it's a cultural problem in the West, where a lot of women that I know, at least personally, unfortunately, they just don't care. It's not that they're intellectually deficient. It's that they don't care at all. Now, my wife happens to not be one of those people. I imagine, given what you've said, that your wife happens to not be one of those people. And in my estimation, the older women tend to be, this is less true of them. But to give you an anecdote, I had a friend, I won't name him, but he wanted to ask this girl, a friend of mine who is a girl, not a girlfriend, right, out on a date. And she was kind of repulsed at the notion, not because he wasn't a good guy, and not even because he wasn't attractive, but because he was a geek. He was really into like economics and politics and stuff like that. And that was like a turnoff for her. You know what I mean? And by and large,
video games. Like, I'm a geek.
Well, yeah, and you can add that to an example as well, right? By and large, that does tend to be, I think, an issue, and more of an issue than it used to be. With that said, that's a matter of reading, not a matter of intellect. So let's just get this part out of the way. I agree with you that the statement on intellect is wrong, right? So now,
I don't think I agree that there's this general sense of apathy with younger women. I think if anything, kind of the younger generation is more charged. My mother was much more apathetic than my wife is, who is, more apathetic than my daughter is. So, and that's because, like my mom, who died many years ago, but, was in her 70s, and she was just kind of like, I'm too old to care about this stuff anymore. Right. Mm-hmm. And, my wife is just like, I've got too many other things to worry about. Right. In certain aspects. Right. And then my daughter's like charged. She's 28 years old. She's like, I'm ready to go. Right. So I think we have to be careful with anecdotes, because anecdotes aren't averages, right? They're very specifically individual examples. And so it's,
And that is fair.
It's tricky. But I mean, I don't think, it's not been my experience. And working with young people, like, it's all I do is work with young people. Apathy is the polar opposite of what I see on a daily basis.
And that is fair, right? Our experiences there are different, and that's, there's no statistic behind what I'm saying. So I do.
But do you see more apathy? Like, it's curious that you say it, but do you see more apathy?
Yeah, for the most part, in what I tend to see amongst, with two exceptions, and those are abortion and LGBT stuff.
Yeah.
Most of the women in my age demographic or younger that I know don't care about politics at all. I mean, they can't be bothered with what's going on in Russia. They can't be bothered with the economy. You know what I mean? But with those two exceptions, though, when it comes to LGBT stuff, they tend to be very passionate. And when it comes to abortion, they tend to be very passionate.
I see those as more social issues than political issues.
In a way, there certainly is
socio-political. Let's walk that fine line.
And
socio-political as opposed to geopolitical.
Yeah, and now here's one thing though. That's a good a good point to divert at in this regard, though. There is one area with it. It's not accurate to say I agree with Joel, because I don't think that Joel is a good communicator, number one, and I actually do think he's a legitimate misogynist, because I've heard other things he said, and I think it's just very true. He's also a legitimate racist, for that record. But one area where me and him would be in strong agreement is, I see, from a consequentialist perspective, I see the female voting demographic as very troublesome. Now, granted, this is partially going to come from where I come from politically and socially as well, right? And I'd like to clarify that I actually do not, Joel Webbin is really into this whole repeal the 19th Amendment idea, which was the giving women the right to vote. I do not agree with that. I think I've shared with you before. I do believe that voting should be limited to head of household, but that does not necessarily mean all men. There will be, obviously, for example, single women are the head of their own household. But as a matter of objective fact, what women are primarily interested in voting blocks, which this does actually line up with my antidotes, but it's also not going to entirely, because it's going to stretch over the last 100 years. The primary impact of giving women the right to vote has been the LGBT thing, which I strongly disagree with. The abortion issue, which in my opinion is non-compromisable. And the sexual revolution. By and large, those are the results of the female voting bloc in the United States of America. And you can add to that things like mass immigration, which is another thing I very strongly am opposed to. I have no problem with people coming over to the United States. I want to be clear on that. I do think it needs to be very controlled. Like, as an example, like with the utmost respect to Somalians, I would ban immigration from Somalia entirely if I were the president, because the reality is their culture is repulsive from my perspective, right? And when it comes to like female genital mutilation and forcing women to wear hijabs and all that kind of stuff, it's like I'm good. I don't want that here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't want that either. I think blocking any one group of people, it could be potentially problematic. But I mean, it's hard with what you said with the LGBT issue. I mean, you could say it's maybe 51%, right? Because there are just more women than men. But I mean, there are just as many gay men as there are gay women. Actually, I think there are more gay men than there are gay women. But at least I should say, just in my experience, in my exposure, of the people that I deal with on a professional basis, there are more gay men than there are women.
Sort of. There are more men who identify as gay than there are women who identify as lesbian, but there is a incredible fluidity in female sexuality that is not present in male sexuality. And so there is a much larger number of women who identify as bisexual than there are women who identify as lesbian, men who identify as gay, and men who identify as bisexual combined.
I don't necessarily. I don't think that's a controversial statement.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. And the other thing is roughly 60%. I hope I got this statistic correct, but it's been a long time since I read it.
74.3% of statistics are made up.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But no, there is a number out there that roughly 60% of straight women, self-identified straight women, have homosexual tendencies, such as either A, primarily consuming lesbian porn, or B, having sexual fantasies with women, or even C, having sexual experiences with women, which is just not present on the male side, right? By and large, straight men don't watch gay porn or have gay fantasies. You know what I mean?
I can say I don't. Yes,
exactly.
But so it's interesting. So there was a Netflix show called The Principles of Pleasure that I noticed the other day, and my wife and I sat and watched all 3 episodes. I found it fascinating. It was aimed mostly at women, but so I enjoyed watching it nonetheless. And it was interesting. So it prompted it prompted a lot of conversation from my wife and I. Stuff we just never talked about. I'm like, hey, have you ever dabbled in the softer sex? And she's like, nope, not at all. Doesn't hold any interest in me whatsoever. I'm like, oh, okay. Yay, we're married and have been for 20 years. So, but it's just I had never asked for whatever it was. I had never asked her that question. She's like, nope, not interested. Doesn't interest me at all. And so it's interesting. Like I said, professionally with me, it's more men. But I also work more with men than I do with women for reasons that I talked about before about, the wanting to dissuade any possibility of impropriety. Right. So it's fair to say it's skewed there, but yeah, it's interesting. I look at the LGBT issue as not my circus, not my monkeys. I am straight. I have never entertained a same-sex even thought in my head. I don't get it. It's just not my thing. I am straight as an arrow. Doesn't impact my life. Right. If you want to do your thing, it also doesn't impact my life. Like, there was a comedian who said once, I think gay people should be able to get married because they should be able to be just as miserable as we are.
Joe Rogan, actually.
Oh, is it him that said that? Yeah. I think it was said before him, but anyway, I can't remember who it was. So you could well be right. I just don't care. Like, you want to get, I don't care. I just don't care. Doesn't impact my life. And I will support a person's ability to do that because it doesn't impact my life negatively in any way, shape, or form. My daughter identifies as asexual. And I'm like, well, I don't know what you mean by that. Because I'm pretty well educated in this, but people, definitions of course are of course subjective. And so she said, I'm more attracted to the individual than the sex. I'm like, okay, whatever. I don't care. Live your life. And
sorry, go ahead.
Like, that's as far as I get into it. I don't care. I will vote to protect an individual's right, especially when it doesn't have anything to do with my life. Right.
See, and I think I used to feel that way. And by the way, one quick note I do want to bring up, the one thing I forgot there is even in terms of non-identifying but supporting of policies, women tend to be more supportive of LGBTQ issues than men do. As a general rule.
That might be, I don't know. We tend to run in circles of generally like-minded people. So I would say people in my personal private life tend to be much of the same agreement as me. People that I speak to online, almost diametrically, like virtually universally diametrically opposed, because I spend more time talking to people I disagree with. So yeah, but like in my personal private life, I'd say, no, I completely disagree with you. But online, I'd say, yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and I think statistically it's roughly a 10% margin. I think women are roughly 10% more likely to support LGBT issues. I do know also, like with the recent election of Mamdani, 86% of Gen Z white women voted for Mamdani, and I think the number was like 68%, if I remember correctly, for men, which is an 18% gap. Obviously, it's
Were
still
these
the
based on
majority of
exit?
men.
Were these based on exit polls that they did?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Which
All right,
means, by the way,
interesting.
that they are still subject to change because there's going to be, obviously the numbers are not set in stone quite yet.
I honestly didn't pay that much attention to it. I knew it was happening, and then I saw it the next day. I'm like, oh, okay.
So, with that being said, 2 points, I think. First one, just to clarify what I'm saying here. I think women overwhelmingly vote progressively on social issues, which I find to be a major problem. Secondly, which in that sense, me and Joel are in agreement, even if I think that it's for different reasons. I think he's a misogynist, and I think that I'm just being conservative. The second issue, then, when you brought up the LGBT thing, I think I used to feel that way, especially in high school, where it's like, hey, I have my convictions, and I disagree with what you're doing. At the same time, I don't think the government should get involved. I brought up that I'm a traditionalist now. And one of the things that distinguishes traditionalism from your more laissez-faire conservatives is a understanding that the state should, within reason, preserve tradition and institution. And part of the extension of that as it pertains to this is I actually do think it's a negative impact on society generally if homosexuality is an accepted cultural practice.
Preserve traditions at the expense of individual rights and freedoms?
Well, one thing that's going to, I think, distinguish me and you
That
here
seems
is that
pretty black or white.
I think so. The answer to your question is no, but there's an underlying assumption here that I want to bring out real quick, which is that I don't think there is a right to a homosexual marriage. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think that homosexuals.
For given your belief system, that's shocking in 0% of in any way.
Right.
It's not shocking at all.
And so when I answer that question, no, then right, it's like I can definitely see how from your perspective it sounds like I want to limit the rights of others, but from my perspective, it's like I don't see that right as existing in the first place.
Yeah, from your if I step inside your head for a second, you would be limiting it, but you wouldn't be limiting something legitimate anyway. So what's the problem?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Now I want to be clear.
I understand.
And like I said, I want to be clear. I don't think that homosexuality should be a crime, but I don't think it should be culturally accepted, which would involve not allowing the marriages and stuff like that. And part of the reason for that, I think, is, I see what from my perspective is a degradation of morals in society. And most of it, I think, stems from, unfortunately, the feminist movement and the sexual revolution. The uptake in adultery and divorce and pornography consumption and people identifying with something that I would consider to be a deviant sexual orientation in the last 50 years since 60 years since the 1960s, it's skyrocketed. And I think it's caused a lot of problems, to be honest. We have a lot more, I think there's a lot more misogynistic men. I think that promiscuity is on the rise, which is both a negative from a emotional perspective and a physical perspective, because I think as much as we would like it to be true that men and women are the same sexually, we're just not. And one of the major differences is that women, and I had a feeling you wouldn't, because it's so obvious to me. Like, I'll give you a perfect example, right? And I won't name names here. But I have two individuals in my personal life, one of which is a complete and total whore, and another one of which is a stay-at-home wife. Now, the first one, part of the reason I'm so comfortable calling my friend a whore is because she says it. It's like a badge of honor. You know what I mean? And with the second one, her identity rests in chaste, housewife, all those sorts of things, right?
Okay.
Now, that is as a general rule, I think that's a uniquely female phenomenon. And the part of the reason is I think it stems all the way back to biology. As the reproducing sex, in the sense of the one that bears the children, and as the fairer sex, I think women are biologically hardwired in a way that we are not, such that their sexual nature, if you will, is like an inherent part of their essence more than us, which is why you tend to find men with a high body count. Yeah, what's up, dude? And women with a high body count, even in a society that accepts it, are terribly depressed and have low self-esteem and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, and you find like porn stars, Lena Rhodes is a good example because she recently left, and so now she's talked about a lot of this.
I don't even know who that is. That's how much porn I consume.
Well, and the point here is she talks about like sex in porn is inherently degrading, and what she's missing, I think, is sex is inherently degrading to an extent. I've never been penetrated. My wife, every time we have sex, is penetrated. That's a conquest in a way, and it just is. It'll never change. Now, in a controlled environment, that's not a negative thing because I love her and I care for her and I don't degrade her. You know what I mean? But in a non-controlled environment, you're just letting numerous men degrade you. You know what I mean? And how does that relate to LGBT? Well, they're both a outgrowth of this sexual revolution that I think has been very, very detrimental to society as a whole, where you now have incredibly low self-esteem women, tons of divorces, tons of fatherless houses. I think it all stems back to this idea of we need to be sexually liberated. And as a result, I don't think we can. I think it's a detriment to society, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think you can be made to feel inferior without your permission. And so for the same reason, I don't think you can be degraded. I don't think people degrade you. I think you allow yourself to feel that way. And if you don't feel that way, then it's not the case. You can't reasonably project that onto someone else. You can't say you've had sex with all that. Aren't you degraded? Because that person can just say no. Right. And so, like I said, it's one of the lines that I've used a lot. It's one of the lines that I've used a lot in talking to people that, have, again, dealing with various issues. So I'll say it again. You can't, no one can make you feel inferior without your permission. And so shock of all shocks, we disagree. I don't think you can be degraded in that way unless you feel that way. I've spoken with survivors of assaults,
right,
that have had to overcome the same type of thing and say, like, I'm this kind of damaged good now in a way, and had to talk and help to counsel them out of that. Is like, no, that's not the case. And get them out of that mindset, because that was something that was, again, projected onto them. So yeah, I don't see the same things as you. Like, I can count my sexual partners on one hand.
Same, actually.
I'm not going to share what my wife has told me about hers. It doesn't matter. It's more than me. I don't care. Right. But it just is. And she's one of the most self-assured, confident humans I've ever met in my life. And so, yeah, I guess we just can't come to a meeting of minds when it comes to that. I don't see the same types of things. Do I wish things were different in some ways? I don't know. I don't think that that's mine to, again, project onto somebody else. I want people to be safe always. I want people to be responsible always. It's weird. I wanted to branch into one of the other topics, but I'm sadly running out of time.
I actually am as well. Unfortunately, I just looked at the clock.
Yeah, and so we're gonna have to stick a pin in this, but I want to carry this on, and just for a teaser for the audience, I want to talk about abortion. I'm not going to say what you think I'm going to say out there, but yeah, maybe we can just kind of wrap this up because I am sadly running out of time. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate the conversations that we have, because it's I love being able to have lively discussions with a person that I disagree with and go away from that discussion knowing that we can do it all again.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I will also say, I think that we should just make it a point while we're here and talking to say, hey, let's set something up, and we can even do, on your podcast if you'd like, or come back here. I don't mind either way, but
we started it here. I think we should finish it here. I'm actually
Yeah,
pulling up my calendar as we speak.
Awesome.
Next week is a write-off.
Yeah,
Okay.
and maybe focus next time on sexual revolution stuff in general, because that will involve the abortion issue and, of course, what we've left pinned here.
Yeah. Pending your approval, I am free 2 weeks from today, Thursday, November the 20th.
If we can do it same time, that should work. I work on Thursdays, but I work later in the day. So if it's same time, that'll certainly work.
Done. It's in my
Awesome.
calendar.
Noted. And I will say it'll be easy because I'll probably have almost the same thumbnail. But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up. Give any parting thoughts you'd like, and I appreciate you being on here, man. It's been good.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. The CApodcast.ca or the CA. Oh, actually, I'll type that in here if you don't mind putting that in.
Absolutely.
If somebody wants to send us an email, they can do it at that email address. And thanks as always. And everybody pay attention. 2 people disagreed, and they were never mean to each other.
Absolutely. And I think I want to say I appreciate that a ton. I think that these conversations are, let me give a brief anecdote before, and this will be where we end, right? Mm-hmm. So when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I was a huge Charlie Kirk fan, and still am, of course, because I'm not the one dead. He is, right? So I still am a fan. But anyways, I saw the reaction from a lot of American leftists, and I pretty quickly got on an edge. Because it was like, oh, you want me dead? Well, it's you or me, and it ain't going to be me kind of thing. And this is the great benefit of having these kinds of conversations, even though we strongly disagree. Michael, give yourself credit. You are a huge part of the reason why I am not on that ledge anymore, because the idea of another liberal out there saying, hey, man, I hated everything he said, and I hate this too. It was like, okay, maybe we're not quite as far gone as I thought, or even if we are, that doesn't mean that I have to join in the circus, because there are people who are going to be outside of the circus with me saying boo. So give yourself credit for that. I'm
always cautious to do that, because a pat on the back is only a foot away from a kick in the ass. So
it is true, though. It is true. There's a lot of credit I got to give to you for me not being a lot more radical right now than I could have been. So
I'll take it.
With that, friends, I think that's good for all of our parting thoughts. Link to his email is in the live chat right now. Link to the CA podcast is in the description. And, of course, links to all my stuff is in the description as well. Friends, if you liked this video, please remember to like and share this video. Consider subscribing if you have not done so. Hit the bell to get notified every time we go live. Leave any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques, or anything of that nature in the comment section down below. If you'd like to support our work, I greatly appreciate anybody who's doing so. Super chat, super stickers, super thanks go a long way. Subscribe to the Patreon for $5 monthly to get access to the breakfast tea. That's a video blog. That's some extra content for you guys. And also, you can purchase the book 15 Questions for Calvinists Answered. It's another way to actually get something for your contribution if you're concerned with that. With that, friends, the Lord wills and tarries, we'll be with you here soon. Our next episode should be, Lord willing, next Monday. talking about the law with Jamie Russell and Israel Trujillo. We're out, friends.
Be a good human.
I said, won't it be a time?